you guys, welcome back to my channel. So today, as you can tell by the title, we are going to be discussing the rumor that Yena from IZ*ONE is going to be joining EVERGLOW after IZ*ONE disbands. And as you can also tell, I'm going to be talking about why Yena from IZ*ONE should not join EVERGLOW. Now, a lot of you might think that I am a Yena anti, or that I have some sort of vendetta against her or IZ*ONE, but I don't. Simply put, I don't really care for Yena or IZ*ONE. If you go through my channel, I've never talked about them in a video before, simply because I just don't stan them and I have really no interest in them. I don't know enough about Yena as a person to dislike her, and none of the critiques made in this video are directed at her as a person. So for a while, I did not understand why people were spreading the rumor that Yena was going to join EVERGLOW. I kept thinking to myself, like, why are people theorizing that this random girl from IZ*ONE is going to be a part of EVERGLOW? So if you're like me and you didn't understand why Yena is being rumored to join IZ*ONE, let me explain. Yena is under the same company as EVERGLOW, Weahua Entertainment. And don't come for me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. I'm pronouncing it based on the way it's spelled in Hangul. But yeah, Yena is under the same company as EVERGLOW, so many people believe that after IZ*ONE disbands in 2021, she'll join EVERGLOW. I already know I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this, but I am nothing if not someone who does not sugarcoat things. But I feel like people need to let go of their Yena x EVERGLOW fantasies and admit to themselves that there really is no good reason as to why Yena should join EVERGLOW. A lot of you may disagree, as there's a good chunk of people cheering for her to join the group, but before you storm to the comments with hate, let me explain myself, and I'm going to try and do so as unbiasedly as possible. So we are going to be examining both the pros and cons of Yena joining EVERGLOW after the disbandment of IZ*ONE. There is a chance that Yena joining EVERGLOW could bring the group more attention. Many people have pointed out that IZ*ONE is very popular in Korea and that her addition to the group could be a chance for EVERGLOW to start winning over the Korean general public. This is a good point, and this could be a good chance for EVERGLOW to start growing a domestic fan base. If Yena joins EVERGLOW, her addition would make them a 7-membered group, which gives them the opportunity to have better choreography. Usually the choreography for even-membered groups tends to be worse, as there really is no chance for there to be a center in the choreography unless someone stands in front of another. There's more chances for unique position changes in the choreography for groups that have an odd number of members as well. As for the line distributions, I'm labeling this as a theory due to the fact that this bonus is based solely off of fan theories alone. Many people have claimed that the reason why Mia gets more lines than anyone else in EVERGLOW is because Weahua plans to cut Mia's lines in half and give them to Yena. If this ends up being true, then it would, in theory, improve the group's line distribution. I feel like a lot of fans of both EVERGLOW and IZ*ONE aren't thinking realistically about Yena's addition to the group, because Yena is going to receive hate if she joins EVERGLOW. It's just a fact. It happens every time a new member is added to a group, and in this case, I feel like the hate will be very severe. We've seen how IOI fans reacted when the group disbanded and the members went their own separate ways. Even to this day, there are still fans of IOI that just won't accept their disbandment. Yena will likely receive more hate than support for joining EVERGLOW from fans of IZ*ONE. She'll also receive hate from fans of EVERGLOW for being a late addition to the group. If you've watched any of my Why X Group flopped videos, you already know this, but lineup changes almost never work in a group's favor. When a group changes their lineup post-debut by either adding or removing a member or members, it gives fans a feeling that the group in question lacks consistency. When companies decide to add members to groups post-debut, it not only feels like damage control, but it also feels like a desperate attempt to revive interest in the group, which obviously implies that the group is beginning to flop. And because Yena is significantly more popular in Korea than EVERGLOW, Yena's addition to the group would give fans the feeling that EVERGLOW cannot succeed on their own, and they need to ride Yena's coattails in order to be successful. This point also ties into my last point. EVERGLOW has already established themselves as a 6-membered group not even 2 years into their career. They've already gotten their first win, released their first mini-album, gone on tour, and essentially hit all of the marks needed in order to solidify themselves as real competition in the K-pop industry and as a group. In addition to this, Weahua Entertainment has never released an official statement regarding Yena joining EVERGLOW and has never actually hinted at the addition of another member. Yena's addition to the group would disturb the dynamic EVERGLOW has already created as a 6-membered group, essentially turning fans off leading them to unstan, especially those who were not fans of IZ*ONE. A lot of people are already content with the dynamic of EVERGLOW. Nothing feels like it's missing or out of place, and adding Yena to the group would only serve to disturb the peace and lead people to unstan. If you remember when IOI disbanded and the members went to join their designated groups, you know how this goes. When groups inherit a produced member, they also inherit all of the acgays that come along with them. This obviously isn't Yena's fault, but if she joins EVERGLOW, there are inevitably going to be acgays of hers that follow her there and will end up harming the rest of EVERGLOW as a result. Daya had the same problem when Chan joined the group after IOI disbanded. Members of Daya even talked about the struggles they dealt with because they were only known as Cheon and friends. Similar to this, people also had criticisms when it was revealed that Somi was supposed to be an ITZY, and many said that she would have outshone the other members due to her time in IOI. Yena being more popular than EVERGLOW would create a huge gap in popularity between her and the other members, leading the other members of EVERGLOW to be overshadowed. Now that we've discussed both pros and cons, let's get into debunking some myths about Yena and EVERGLOW that have been going around. I know some people think that the voting scandal for Produce is the reason why Yena shouldn't join EVERGLOW, but let's be honest, Korea doesn't really care about that anymore, the proof of this being that IZ*ONE broke the record for most first week sales by a girl group in history. And with their most recent comeback being a success as well, the rigging scandal really isn't something Weehua would have to worry about if they decided to add Yena to the group. I think it's time we have the discussion about how the idea that produced idols being able to save groups from failure is a myth. People are under the impression that if a group takes in an idol that was a part of a produced group, that it's that group's one-way ticket to success no matter how unsuccessful they were before. But this isn't true. Just look at all of the members of IOI post-disbandment. Wikimiki, Gugudan, and Daya all essentially flopped, and Gugudan and Daya added members from IOI post-debut in hopes that it would revive some excitement for the group, and they still weren't successful. Kristen, may they rest in peace, seemed promising, but sadly we'll never know whether or not they would have been successful or whether they would have eventually flopped too. And Somi is doing God knows what right now, so the only two successful post-IOI acts are Wooju Sonyo and Chungha. And in the case of Wooju Sonyo, Yeonjung arguably isn't even the reason for their popularity. I go through all of this to say that the idea that Yena is EVERGLOW's ticket to domestic success is a lie. While it's not impossible that Yena could make EVERGLOW more popular, it's also possible that the attention she brings with her doesn't benefit EVERGLOW at all, or that she overshadows the rest of EVERGLOW. In fact, it's even more likely that EVERGLOW will end up just like another post-IOI group if she's added. This is not guaranteed. Like I said earlier, a lot of people assume that Mia has so many lines because half of them are supposed to go to Yena and that her addition to the group will balance out line distributions. But I think y'all got the math wrong on this one. Splitting Mia's lines in half does not mean more lines for the other members like Onda or Yiren, who have been repeatedly pushed to the side in many of their songs. It just means that Yena gets half of Mia's lines, and now both Mia and Yena are singing half of EVERGLOW songs while the other members get left with crumbs. And on top of this is based off of a fan theory. Yena could join the group and Mia could still get most of the lines. Weehua could just be shitty at distributing lines fairly, and Yena could join and nothing would change. When people talk about this, they usually bring up Red Velvet as proof that Yena joining will be good for EVERGLOW. However, it's not really fair to compare these situations to each other because they aren't the same. Yuri joined Red Velvet mere months after the group made their debut. Even more important than that, Yeri was added to the group during a time when Red Velvet wasn't popular. They had no solid fanbase, no first win, and they hadn't solidified themselves as a group yet. And because of this, most Revelovs don't remember a time when Red Velvet was 4 members as opposed to 5. EVERGLOW, however, is significantly more popular now than Red Velvet was predating the months before Yeri joined. And they've solidified themselves as a 6-membered group, and they're far enough into their careers that people have grown to know and love EVERGLOW as they are now. IZ*ONE disbands in 2021, which means EVERGLOW would have been a 6-membered group for a minimum of 2 years by the time Yena finally joins. People have grown to know and love EVERGLOW just as they are now. Yuri joining Red Velvet half a year after their debut is not the same as Yena joining EVERGLOW 2 years after their debut, especially when Red Velvet had significantly less to lose at the time they added Yuri than EVERGLOW does by adding Yena. And even despite the fact that Yuri joined Red Velvet early on, she still received hate for being added just months later. Imagine the hate that Yena will receive for being added 2 years later. So, in conclusion, I personally think it's a bad idea for Yena to be added to EVERGLOW. I think when you lay out the pros and cons, you realize that there's a bigger chance of her addition being messy and causing problems as opposed to making EVERGLOW more popular. Also, if Weehua was planning to add her to EVERGLOW all along, they did a piss poor job of preparing fans for her addition to the group. EVERGLOW doesn't have a secret member concept. Weehua hasn't made an official statement about whether or not she'll be added to the group. Hell, as of the making of this video, there is no concrete proof of Yena joining EVERGLOW. So if they are actually planning on adding her, they're setting both her and EVERGLOW up for failure by not preparing fans for this change sooner. I think most people wanting Yena to join EVERGLOW aren't really thinking about her addition to the group in a realistic way. They just like both IZ*ONE and EVERGLOW and like the idea of their faves being in a group together without thinking about the consequences that come along with it. It's sort of the way people fantasize about Black Velvet being a group, but you know, neither SM nor YG are actually stupid enough to listen to fans that want Black Velvet to exist. I guess my overall point is that from a logical standpoint, Yena's addition to EVERGLOW really only serves to cause more problems than it solves. All of the pros of Yena joining that I mentioned previously are just theories, while the cons mentioned are much more likely to happen based on the history of produced groups disbanding and joining their respective groups. So yeah, that's basically it. I know I probably made a lot of y'all mad, and I'm probably going to get called a Yena anti, or an EVERGLOW anti, or both. Um, and I know my opinion has no effect on whether or not Yena will join the group, but I've been seeing a lot of talk about this and I wanted to formally voice my opinion on it finally. But yeah, I love you guys and I will see you in my next video and I hope you enjoyed. Bye!